All right. These are your genetics intro notes. I am not here today, as you can tell. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we go through these notes, I'd like you to keep kind of a running list of questions that you wonder, things that you're curious to know more about. And if you look on the inside of your notes in the kind of right-hand side there, you'll see a place for you to record your questions. And I said to put at least 3 there, and at the end you're going to put one of those on a post-it note, your favorite or one that you're most curious about, and post it to the front board. And we'll be doing something with these questions. We'll be researching them either at the end of this week or next week. So let's get started. To start off with, I would like to introduce you to Gregor Johann Mendel, considered the father of genetics. We'll talk more about him on Friday, but here's kind of a picture of him. He was very famous for studying pea plants and learning how traits were passed from one generation to generation. So there is a nice painting of him and his forehead, so enjoy that. This would be the first. What I have underlined here is what goes in your notes. That'll be the same throughout this entire spiel, so enjoy. All right, next up, heredity. Official definition here is the passing of genetic traits from one generation to another. So when we are saying that we're studying genetics, we are also studying heredity. So at first, people in general thought that traits were blended together, like how you mix colors together to get new colors. And that was in fact very wrong. So at first, before Mendel was around, you can see here we have like 2 test tubes, the idea that when we'd have 2 traits that they get blended together, and then all the future offspring would have that blended trait. So if your mom had blonde hair and your dad had black hair, that the baby would have brown hair, and all future generations would then have brown hair. This was in fact not what happens and not how genetics works. So we found out that traits are really passed on intact. So both traits, one from your mom, one from your dad, are in you. And I do want to say, I meant to say this right at the start, as we get into genetics, when I'm referring to mom and dad, that would be your biological parents. So whether that's the family you live with or not, if I ever am talking about mom and dad, generally speaking, when we're talking about genetics, that will be regarding your biological parents. So just so you are aware of that. So you can see here with this the idea that if we had a mixing, that the test tube here would still be mixed, and then if we had a second generation cross, we could get back out to what we had originally. So moving right along. So this is going to be a lot of new terminology, or maybe a refresher on some terminology that you will need to really have down with this unit. And this is kind of your first bit here, which is genotype. Your genotype is your genetic makeup, and it's symbolized with letters. So in this case down here, the genotype of all of these offsprings, this is called a Punnett square, maybe you've seen this before, would be big A, little a, and that is a genotype, and we'll get more into what those mean here in a moment and the rest of this week. So these are called Punnett squares. Again, these are showing genotypes and what we have in the offspring. So here are the genotypes. We have big T, big T, little t, as well as little t, little t. So again, they are always, the genotype is your genetic symbols with letters. Your phenotype, on the other hand, is your physical features, which include appearance, development, and behavior. So this is what we see. I always remember phenotype as being your physical characteristics. Both start with that PH if that's a helpful mnemonic for you. So your phenotype is, again, what your physical features would be, and it does include your development and behavior as well. So your handedness, that is determined. That is your phenotype, you know, which hand you write with, freckles, obviously hair color, even whether you are vertically challenged or not is part of your phenotype. So next up we have alleles. Alleles, which is a crazy word and spelled crazily, alleles are different genes or possibilities for the same trait. You get one from each parent. Example would be like your blue eyes and brown eyes. So this is called a chromosome pair, what this is an image of right here, a homologous in this case, pair of chromosomes, meaning one of these would come from your biological mother and one would come from the biological father. And they're the same type of chromosome, but again, you get one from each to make you have a pair here. Oh no, restart later. Let's try it out. So in this case, on this gene, the gene for eye color from this parent would be, blue eyes, and the gene for this eye color on the, father's one would be right in the same location, but it might be a different allele. Again, these are just possibilities or genes for the same trait. Since you get 2 alleles for every trait, you get one from your mom, one from your dad, it makes sense that you'd wonder how come your eyes aren't 2 different colors, or your hair, how come you don't have different, every other strand is different colored or something like that. And this is a good question to ponder, and we'll kind of look at this right now. So the next kind of information here is looking at the idea that we have dominant alleles and recessive. Because one of the 2 alleles will be dominant, that means it overrules the other one, and it's the trait that ends up being seen, or it's the trait that always shows up in the organism. It's what you see. So it becomes that phenotype. So that's why you don't end up with one blue eye and one brown eye. You end up with the dominant one, and it masks or hides the other one. The hidden trait, the one that you don't end up seeing, is called the recessive trait. So this is an example of a recessive trait. This would be, someone who is albino. That is a very recessive trait, as well as here we have our little bent pinkies. Again, it's the hidden one that you typically don't end up seeing unless your genotype has 2 of those recessive alleles, which we'll look at in a second. So sometimes we do have some examples of when both traits do show up anyways, and this is called codominance. So this is your classic example you'll see throughout this unit. This is called a codominant cow having a roan coat. Roan is kind of like red and kind of speckled. So this isn't like when you see like a cow that's white with black spots, like the stereotypical cow. That is not necessarily codominance. These are the type that are codominant, though. They typically have the kind of part red coat, part kind of white and speckled. When both alleles are identical, the animal always passes on the same traits to the next generation. This is called homozygous. And this is what you get with purebreds as well. And this is when you have your genotype would be both capital, both dominant in this case, or both recessive. So 2 recessive alleles. Dominant alleles are shown with a capital T, and recessive are shown with a lower, or not any letter, uppercase or would be dominant, and any lowercase letter would be showing the recessive. So it's homozygous if they are both the same. Homo means same, so this meaning they're the same letter, both capital or both lowercase. And again, that happens with purebreds, and that's why breeders like to, have homozygous traits, because you know what you're going to get in your offspring. A hybrid trait is called heterozygous, and this is where you have a pairing of a dominant and recessive. So here you see a capital T and a lowercase t. This is just an example. I could have chosen any letter I wanted. But again, the idea that you have one of each type of allele. So here we'd have, this is, I'm just put in a couple hybrids here. This is a liger, and here would just be a hybrid dog and wolf cross. So we have, within you have several traits, and you might be heterozygous for them, and you might not even know it. So the study of genetics is, in fact, the study of you. If you're on bus 2 in DC, you might be able to find your face as a Where's Waldo in here. But I just wanted to give you that kind of basic, get you some good info as far as terminology goes for this short unit. This unit will only be a couple weeks long. So there you have it. That is the end of your notes. If you haven't yet, you're going to want to write down some questions or anything that you're kind of curious to know about regarding genetics. It could be regarding genetic diseases. If you've ever had any questions about specific things, if you have a trait and you're wondering, is this genetic or is it just random? This would be the time to write any question you have regarding genetics or heredity in general. And then choose the one that you're most interested in. and go ahead and write it on a post-it note and put it up on the front whiteboard where there's a blue, put like a blue sheet of butcher paper up there that says genetics questions. If you have room on the front, you can include your name. If not, put it on the back there so that I know whose question belongs to who. And again, later this week, hopefully, you'll be choosing a couple questions that you want to research. So we want to get a nice, good, big pool of questions to go from. So that is all I have for you right now. Let's see.